Hey there, everybody! It is time for another native, American flute lesson, and I'm Enoch Chapman, and I'm excited to be presenting this to you today. It's interesting when talking about like Native American flute and everything. I have always loved the term Native American wood flute, but I'm finding out more and more people don't like the word wood for some reason. They take it out when they start looking for it. Maybe it's just too long to look for or anything, but I've always loved the Native American wood flute. And I know that there's different materials you can get out like clay and you can get out like make PVC pipe and other type of things like that. But I've always loved the word wood and I like the term wood, and I think it's a much more natural thing to actually have a Native American wood flute, but you will be seeing me more and more speaking about just the Native American flute and dropping the word wood because a lot of people just don't use it as much as I would love to see them use the term. What I'd like to do today is I'd like to first off review some of the stuff that we talked about in our last lesson, and then kind of move forward from some of the things that we learned from our last lesson and give a couple other steps of what we can do to improve ourselves as performers and improve ourselves as players. There's some really important things to understand in terms of you wanting to be a better player, and that's one is the idea of skills. What are the skills out there that you need to learn? What are the skills that are important for you to study? What skills out there will help you kind of get the next level of proficiency that you want to play? And skills are very tactile, and they're very like endurance based, and they're very things that you practice with your hands, and they're very physical things for the flute. And so when we're talking about skills, we're really talking about the idea of finger placement, putting our fingers on the flute, making them sound properly, getting the best sounds, maybe introducing new notes that we're not used to. Those are all are about skills and how to better present yourself as a performer. The second thing is kind of this idea of like what type of tools do you have of your availability to be able to present? What type of tools in your toolkit can you pull out? So skills are going to be how to actually play the tangible factor of you putting fingers on it, and then these kind of like tools that you have are the rhythms that you can hear, the idea of maybe like scales and musicality and scales, learning how to play up and down different scales and variations on that inside the flute, the idea of when you're playing a piece and you want to go faster or slower, so the idea of like a speeding up or slowing down, a accelerando or dondos, if you're talking musical terms. Those type of concepts are important for you to understand, so that you have different types of tools that you can like just use as you're presenting a piece. And that's important, right? You have your skills that we want to talk about. You also have these tools that you want to talk about. And then the final thing that I think is really important is the idea of how to improve you as a performer. And that's kind of an internal thing. Each one of us has innate understandings of what performance means and what that is going to work in terms of how we get our messages out to people, how we want to say things to people, how we want to convey those ideas. And so those three concepts those three concepts and how we're going to present them are the skills. How are you actually going to use your fingers? That's kind of how we're going to show our lessons. We're going to give you more skills to increase your musical toolkit. We're going to give you tools to help you be able to kind of do things differently, right? So here's one way that most people do it, but then right. But we want to change that up, and we want to give you variation. We want to give you the ability for you to uh, express yourself in a different way, and those are all come out with different tools that you can use inside your musical toolkit. And then improving yourself as a performer, that's the idea of expression, personal expression, what that means to you as you're trying to convey the piece, the message, the music that you're playing. What does that mean? And that's going to be little things. It's going to take the tools and then utilize it in your own fashion. It's going to take your skills and give yourself your own like kind of voice in terms of the language that we're performing in. And so these three kind of tiered concepts are really what our lessons are going to be about. That's how we are going to express what we're going to express and give you we're going to give you. We also talked last time about the idea of, what is a flute, what do I want to look for in a flute, and how do I actually, talk about the different parts. We won't go over that again, but we did talk about the idea of the mouthpiece, the actual idea of the finger holes and how you place your fingers, how you usually have your bottom hand and your top hand, and that your bottom hand is probably going to be more the stronger hand. So if you're right-handed, you're probably going to put your right hand as a bottom hand. If you're left-handed, you can switch. However, there's nothing to say that you can't, always have your right hand be the bottom hand or your left hand be the bottom hand. If you want to prefer to play it that way, you're more than welcome. But the idea is that you have two hands, your bottom and your top, and the bottom covers the bottom three holes, and your top covers the top three holes. And then we also have, this hole here is just an airway hole to get, the instrument to blow through. This hole up here is the actual sound hole, and that's the thing that produces the sound. And we talked about that in explaining a little bit more in depth about what the flute actually does, and how it actually performs and how it actually plays. We also talked about the first scale and how if we keep this finger here as an anchor finger, we don't have to ever move it. It's always going to be there. It's always to be constant. So your top hand, third finger is always going to be stuck there. It's called the anchor finger. And when we move our fingers up individually off of each note, that we get this pentatonic scale, this minor pentatonic scale. And that's just by keeping that anchor finger there. And we learned that that's a way for us to be able to, create our first sounds, our first tones. We blow into the instrument in kind of like a sigh fashion. So we go into the instrument, we just sigh into it. We don't have to do any type of really strong attack. If we want to, we can make strong attacks, but we can just go and sigh into it. And that's a good way to start playing, and that's a good way to start getting a sound. And then we also talked about the idea of breathing. And breathing is really important because it's a different way that we breathe compared to how we normally breathe in our regular everyday life, right? Well, all of us breathe. That's nothing uncommon, but there are different techniques and there are different ways for us to actually breathe and create, a little bit more, uh, I guess, a fuller breath, something that allows us to be able to produce sound a little bit better, allows us to be able to last longer in our breath. And these breaths and the way we breathe in that way is to actually use our diaphragm, which is a muscle that's like right below our belly, and it's a muscle down there that helps us actually create the most air possible within our lungs. So, for the most part, when we breathe, and you actually can see people breathe, especially when they get out of breath and everything. You can see their shoulders go up and down, type thing. But when we actually breathe inside of music for any type of instrument, we end up not moving our shoulders. We end up trying to push down on our belly and get our belly to expand, so we can push down on our diaphragm, so our lungs can expand, and all of our body becomes kind of active in that way. So our rib cages expand, our belly gets pushed down, and our diaphragm gets engaged. I hate that word, but I'm going to say it anyways. Our diaphragm gets engaged and be able to, get the most air out of our lungs. And a good way to kind of see that is if you were to put this type of connection on your stomach, and you put it like right, a little bit above your belly button. So not necessarily on your belly button, but just a little bit above your belly button. So you go like this and you put it above your belly button and you breathe in. And if you breathe in and this moves and expands, you're getting your diaphragm engaged to actually help put more air into your lungs. If it doesn't move, it means you're breathing in a way that still gets air into your body, but it's not getting your diaphragm to be engaged. So you want to put your fingers there again in kind of this motion, kind of this setting. So your two middle fingers are touching each other. And you just kind of rest them a little bit above your belly button, and then you just breathe in. And if your fingers expand like mine did, they kind of went that way. Now I have a big belly, so that it might expand a lot. That means that you got your diaphragm moving. Now, you can breathe again without actually doing that. And now I'm going to show you, I'm going to breathe, but I'm going to actually use my shoulders and not necessarily my belly. Now, by doing that, my fingers actually stayed the same. They don't move. And it's just a different way of taking the breath in. Now, is that a better breath or a much more powerful breath? Not necessarily. It's just a different way of breathing. The thing about the diaphragm is that when you use that diaphragm, your diaphragm muscle can actually, it's a muscle, so you can control it and you can keep it engaged longer, which allows you to get more air in and allows you to use air longer for longer breaths. So breaths are important because it is like the lifeblood of the flute. It's how we play. So we want to be able to play the flute as long as possible, get the best sound as possible, while still doing everything else to actually, keep yourself alive. But by giving yourself that diaphragm push, by giving yourself that ability to expand your lungs, actually have that breath in there, it gives you a much better control over how much air you can expend at one time. So I do a deep breath. And as I blow out, I can actually blow out a much longer period if I have this kind of diaphragm controlled breathing than if I was to just breathe with my lungs up here and not kind of engage my entire, full on diaphragm. I hate that word, but it's the only word that actually makes sense. It's you engaging it. So, but anyways, so with that being said, then, breathing is really important. So let's just take a quick moment and inhale for like 4 counts. Let's hold for 2 counts and then exhale for 4 counts. So it's going to be like this: inhale, hold for 2 counts, and then exhale for 4 counts. And that's a good way to kind of practice your breathing. Okay. We're going to do that again. We're going to inhale for 4, hold for 2, and then exhale for 4. So hold, exhale. And that's it. It's a simple breathing exercise to help you get, your body kind of active and ready to start playing, and also help you kind of improve your breath. If you want to, you can inhale for 2 seconds or 2 beats, hold for 2, and then exhale for 4, and try to see if you can get enough air to exhale the entirety inside of 4. So you inhale for 2, you hold, and then you exhale for 4. And that kind of helps you get that kind of gasping effect. Can you inhale for 1, hold for 2, and exhale for 4? And you can play around with all these different types of numbers to see, how long can you hold it for, right? Can you exhale for 8 instead of for 4? Can you exhale for 10 instead of for 4? How long can you go for? How long can you create a tone for? How long can you last? And it's all good to kind of understand that breathing aspect so you can make sure that you are getting the best air, the most air, in the most practical way possible for you to actually create sounds, because that's what we want to do, is we want to create the right sounds. So always make sure you breathe, and we'll probably start every lesson a little bit with just the idea of breathing, so that you're getting ready, your body's getting ready to be able to start playing as best as possible. Now, for the most part, for this lesson, what I'd like to do is I'd like to talk a little bit about the lower part of the flute, these first 3 holes, if possible, because these are like the first 3 notes that you play, right? You move up the scale, do 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 do, and you actually play those first 3 notes. And you actually, those are pretty big notes, important to play. So what you want to do then is let's just focus in on these 3 for the first little while, and we'll kind of understand a little bit of how they work. Then, in the next lesson, we'll probably talk about the next couple notes up top, the 2, and then the actual optional third if you have a 6-hole flute. If you don't have a 6-hole flute, it's going to be a little crazy, but we'll explain it a little bit. So the bottom 3 notes. Now, remember how we talked that every flute has a key that it plays in. So this flute here, this is actually my B flute. And it's just my B flute. It's the way that we play, the key of B using this flute. And it's a B minor, which means it's the same thing as D major for those people who are musical people out there who understand majors and minors. The B flute is a B minor, so it's actually the same key as D major, which is good. No sharps and flats and all the accidentals that go inside of that. I have my other flute up here, and the flute that I played probably last time, which is my A flute. And my A flute is again, it's A minor, which when you put it all together, that C major is the same thing as C major. Uh, it has different notes, even though it's the same three notes, three holes that we're talking about in the flute. So my B flute is going to play three different notes than my A flute because they start on a different pitch and they are in a different key. My A flute is in the key of A minor, and my B flute is in the key of B minor, which has three completely different notes, even though the fingerings, the holes, are the exact same. This is kind of a weird thing to get your head around in terms of being able to play with other people and other groups and other ensembles, because it's trying to figure out like what key can I play in with this flute, what's going to sound right. Okay, so you're playing in the key of A. Well, if you're playing the key of A major, I can't really play my A minor flute because those have different notes inside of it. What's going to work in the key of A major? Let me figure out my minor, F sharp, so I can pull out my F sharp flute and actually play in the key of A major. And we have to think about that in terms of Native American flute players, because we don't have the luxury of being able to jump back and forth into every single key as easily as other instruments do. So B flute here, my B flute, but we're going to talk about these first three notes. Now, when we cover up all the notes, that's the tone of the flute. That's the name of the flute. So that is the name of the flute. That's my B. On my A, when I cover up those bottom three holes, I get an, that's right, I get an A. Not that anyone said anything, but just to play along, right? So A, B, a little bit different sound, but the same fingerings. The three holes get covered, and we get the lowest known name of the flute. Now, let's talk about the musical alphabet real quickly. So, our musical alphabet is only 7 letters long: A, B, C, D, E, F, G. That's 7 letters. There's nothing more, nothing less. You don't have a Z. There's no, X. There's no M note. It's just those 7 notes: A, B, C, D, E, F, G. 7 notes. Now, when we play a regular scale, what we call a diatonic scale, we just start at one of those letters in the alphabet and go up the alphabet and back down to that letter. For instance, if I want to play a C major scale, I start at C, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. And then you see that after I got to G, I jumped back to A and I just went back up to C, right? C, D, E, F, G. There's no H. So I go right to A, B, C. And that's my C major scale. However, when we're talking about pentatonic scale, we're only talking about using 5 of those letters. So 2 letters have to get dropped somewhere. Don't know where, don't know how yet. It's just we know that 2 letters have to get dropped. In this flute, my first holes, my first fingering, my first position is when I have my lower hand down like this. So this is first position. And now I have the name of the flute. This is my B, so here's my B. Second position is when I actually remove my third finger on my bottom hand. So this is going to be a second position note. Now, this second position note, you would think if we were going up the alphabet, it would be C. However, because it's a pentatonic scale, which is only 5 notes, we actually have to drop a letter. We skip over a letter. And we actually skip over the C and go to D. So it's going to be some sort of variation on D. Whether it's a D sharp, a D flat, or a D natural, we know that it's going to be some sort of variation on D. With my B flute, it's actually going to be a D natural. So just a regular D. So I'm going to go from B, which is my first position, to D, which is my second position. So now I have 2 notes, B, D, and if I move my finger off and go to my third position here, which is going to be just my first finger in my bottom hand, now I'm going to have the next note, which is going to be an E or some variation of E. And this term in this world is actually just going to be an E. So I'm going to go from B to D to E. First position, B. Second position, D. Third position, E. And then when I do open position or fourth position, it's going to be my F of some sort. And this is actually going to be an F sharp because of the nature of how the B scale works and the D major scale works, the B minor scale and D major scale, depending on the accidentals. It's actually going to be an F sharp, but it's going to be some variation of F. Or it could have been an F natural, an F flat, or an F sharp. This is going to be an F sharp, just so you know. So we're going to play first position B, second position D, third position E, open position or fourth position, which is going to be a F sharp. Those are the notes of the flute. And that pattern works over and over again, depending on what other flutes you're playing. So let's just take a look at my A flute. Remember that from first position to second position, we actually skip over a letter. We skip over a letter of the alphabet. So I'm going to start with my A. That's going to be first position. And now I'm going to get to my next note. And my next note, what do you think it's going to be? I'll just give you a second here. Remember, we skip over the next letter, so it's got to be a C of some sort. It's actually going to be a regular C, C natural. And then I go to my next position, which is third position, and that's going to be a D. And then I go to open position or fourth position, which is going to be my note E. And that's important. As we play all of our instruments and whatever flute it's going to be and whatever key it's going to be, we can understand that pattern exists. Our covered notes, our first position notes, are always going to be the name of the flute. The second position notes is going to be the next letter after the letter. We're going to skip a letter, right? So instead of A, it's going to be a C. So A, skip over B, get to C. So if I was to play an F sharp flute, my first position, all fingers covered, would be an F sharp. If I'm going to play my next position, my second position, it's going to be a F sharp, jump over G and get to A. It's going to be an A of some sort. And then I'm going to go up to B, and then I'm going to go up to C of some sort, which in the F sharp flute world is going to be a C sharp. In the A flute world, I go from A, I jump over my next letter and get to C, D, E, and back down. That's all my notes. So that's the thing to kind of remember as we go along, that these notes, right, for the flutes, they all follow a very similar pattern. They're just all different depending upon what flute we're playing. So we're playing the same fingerings. We have the same positions for our fingers, but the notes change as we're playing the instrument. And that's kind of important to know if you want to play with other instruments, is that those notes can change. Now, let me give you a couple little exercises to maybe help you perform a little bit better and practice a little bit more so that you can get used to these fingerings. And again, we're just focusing on the lower hand. We're not going to focus on anything more, just the lower hand. And so these exercises are going to be very simple. First exercise is just going up the notes ascending. So we start with this first position, all covered. Then we go second, third, open or fourth, third, and that's just it. Just not keep that pattern. We won't go down again. We'll just go up. And just get used to that fingering. Very simple. Nothing too difficult. It's just an ascending pattern. And if you want to do the reverse of it, it's also a good pattern to know. And that's just going from open or fourth position to third position to second position to, first position. So open. Right? Descending pattern. Nothing too tricky, nothing too complicated. It's just a descending pattern. Pretty easy, pretty simple, pretty self-explanatory. Nothing too difficult there. And then if you want to combine those two together, right, so you do an ascending to descending pattern, that's a good way to also get your fingers used to the idea of playing, right? It's very simple. Nothing too tricky, nothing too difficult. You're just going up and you're going down. But are there other variations of patterns to play? Yes. I actually really like the idea of alternating patterns. So you go from first position to third position, which is going to be a jump to here. going to second position to fourth position. So first to third to second to fourth. And that's a good kind of pattern to get used to hearing like these skips and these jumps, but also kind of getting your fingers used to the idea of being able to play something that's not just ascending or descending. So here's first to third to second to fourth, which is what I call like a very simple jump pattern. Whoops, let me try it again. I actually went to fourth. So let's try again. And the trick here is to try to get it so your fingers are coming off clean on the jumps and you're not getting like a pass through note. So this is what I mean by a pass through note. You actually hear that note as it's kind of passing through. What we want to do is we want to kind of avoid that. So this jump pattern is good to try to get your fingerings to get really precise and really on the notes so that we're not hearing that kind of pass through note. So it's a good exercise to kind of build up. Now, again, you can do the inverse of that, right? 4 open position to second, to third position to first. And again, it's the same type of thing. Trying not to get those pass through notes, trying to get straight onto the tones so that everything sounds as crisp and clear as possible. Well, first I gotta get my fingers in the right place. So that's not good. Don't do what I just did. And that's kind of just a good dexterity exercise for your fingers to get used to that kind of up and down patterns, but also it's good to get that kind of clarity of notes. So ascending and descending again, right? Ascending up through the pattern and descending down through the pattern. You get this type of idea going. I mean, that pattern's good. It's a good thing again to build your dexterity, but also it's a good thing to kind of keep you going, keep you engaged, keep your fingers moving, and not trying to get those pass through notes, but trying to get a really strong clarity out of the tones you're creating. And you can create other types of patterns for you to be able to play through. You can create a bigger jump pattern. So go from first position instead of going to third, go first position to open, and then go to second position to third, and do some sort of like just variations on that and give yourself the ability to play through different notes and different types of patterns inside of your flute. It will help you build up your dexterity, so your skills are getting improved, and also gives you the idea of here's the different notes to be able to play. Now that you understand those tools, now putting that into your performance, it's the idea of using those in slower and faster times so that it can make your expressions work. I'm just going to play something on the lower hand. I'm not going to play anything more than just those notes that we just talked about, but we'll see how like expression can work by implementing longer tones, shorter tones, and just kind of how I'm feeling at the moment to give you an interesting song. So you can hear how, just kind of chaining some of these ideas together, playing things a little bit faster, playing things a little bit slower, giving your breath a time to kind of fade out or fade in or pull it in together to create solid sound. All that stuff helps you create some sort of cool expression for you that you can use again over and over, however it is that you're playing. Just sitting down and relaxing and playing something, like that's all just lower hand work, but it's just a lot different when you're, playing what you're feeling and expressing it at the time. So, again, it's the idea of this lower hand working through these different types of notes here. And first, understanding what those notes are, and then second, just kind of playing through the exercises so you can get your finger dexterity going. So, to recap, the bottom hand, all covered, first position, moving your third finger on the bottom hand, second finger on the bottom hand, third, all open position or fourth position, first, second, third, open. And the name of the notes are: first position is the name of the flute, then second position is skip the next letter and get up to the next letter of the flute. So B, D, and then we go up a letter, E, and then go up a letter, F sharp, E, D, B. And those are important because when we start throwing in other notes, which we'll throw in a lot of different notes, but when we start throwing in other notes, what we're going to do is we're going to give you, I don't know, some sort of different ideas and different thoughts for you to be able to add to your expression. So to recap again, lower notes, name of the notes, the finger positions, and if you practice that, practice your breathing, practice your expressions, just play a little, I guarantee you're going to be a better flute player as you keep moving along. And next time we will talk a little bit more about some different types of notes. Maybe we'll introduce the upper hand, maybe we won't, but we'll figure out something else to talk about and give you a little bit more tools for your toolkit to be able to play. So thank you very much for joining us, and I will hopefully see you next time.